I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. Derek leaned back in his leather chair during our quarterly investor call and announced to 12 executives and 4 major investors that I wouldn't be getting my promised raise. My annual bonus canceled for attitude problems, he declared with a smirk. The conference room erupted in nervous laughter while I sat there maintaining my composure as my heart pounded. 5 days later, our $440 million partner fund froze every single payment. Their lawyers sent one devastating line that changed everything: patent. Number 4532 belongs to her, not you. Derek's phone clattered to the floor. My name is Rosalind, and 3 years ago, I believed Derek Williams was my mentor, my champion, and the key to my future in Austin's booming tech scene. As head of intellectual property development at TechFlow Solutions, I had built what I thought was a partnership based on mutual respect and shared vision. How wrong I was. Derek recruited me personally from my previous startup that had collapsed during the 2020 financial uncertainty. I was 28, brilliant with algorithms, but naive about corporate politics. He found me at a networking event at the Austin Convention Center, nursing a beer and trying to figure out my next move. His pitch was magnetic: join TechFlow as a senior engineer, develop cutting-edge encryption technology, and grow with the company as we revolutionize data security. Those early months felt like a dream. Derek would stop by my cubicle asking about my progress on various projects, genuinely interested in my ideas about improving network security protocols. He encouraged me to think bigger, to push boundaries, to create something that could change the industry. When I started working on what would become my revolutionary data encryption algorithm, it began as late-night experimentation in my small apartment near South Austin. I remember those countless evenings surviving on coffee and determination, scribbling coding equations on whiteboards I had mounted on every wall of my living room. The breakthrough came during a particularly frustrating night in March, when I realized that existing encryption methods were fundamentally flawed in their approach to data packet sequencing. My algorithm could encrypt and decrypt information at speeds that made current technology look like dial-up internet. When I shared my initial findings with Derek, his eyes lit up with what I interpreted as genuine excitement for scientific discovery. He immediately saw the commercial potential and convinced me to develop the technology further under TechFlow's resources. The conversation took place in his corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake. He assured me this would be my ticket to the executive level, my pathway to becoming a true partner in the company's success. I documented everything meticulously because Derek insisted on maintaining detailed records for patent protection. Email after email confirmed my sole ownership of the intellectual property. Derek would respond to my progress reports with messages like, "This is entirely your innovation, Rosalind. Make sure we have complete documentation of your development process." At the time, I thought he was being protective of my interests. The team around us seemed supportive too. Sarah, our HR director, would always smile when passing my desk, sometimes stopping to ask about my projects with genuine curiosity. James, the chief financial officer, would nod approvingly during my presentations about the algorithm's potential market applications. Patricia, Derek's longtime assistant, would schedule extra lab time for me and ensure I had access to the best development equipment. But there were signs I should have recognized. During our team celebration dinner at Franklin Barbecue last month, Derek pulled me aside as we waited in the legendary line. The conversation felt casual, friendly, like a mentor checking in with his protege. He mentioned that TechFlow was preparing for an initial public offering within 6 months, and my patent would be the cornerstone of their market valuation. "You're going to be our chief technology officer," he said, placing a paternal hand on my shoulder. "This algorithm of yours is worth millions, possibly hundreds of millions. I want to make sure you get everything you deserve." He promised substantial pre-IPO equity, a seat on the board of directors, and recognition as the company's primary innovator. Standing there in the Texas heat, surrounded by the aroma of smoking brisket and the chatter of Austin's tech elite, I felt like I was finally achieving the success I had worked toward my entire career. Derek seemed so sincere, so committed to my advancement. He asked detailed questions about my development notes, my backup documentation, my personal records of the algorithm's evolution. Now I understand that conversation differently. Derek wasn't gathering information to protect me. He was conducting reconnaissance, learning exactly what evidence existed of my ownership, planning how to eliminate me while stealing my life's work. Every question was strategic, every assurance was manipulation, every promise was a lie designed to keep me compliant while he constructed his betrayal. The most painful realization is how completely I trusted him. When he suggested I share copies of my personal development notes for legal documentation purposes, I handed them over without hesitation. When he recommended routing all patent communications through his office to ensure proper corporate oversight, I agreed immediately. When he gradually started excluding me from high-level strategy meetings, claiming he wanted to shield me from business politics so I could focus on innovation, I felt grateful for his protection. 3 years of my life, my most brilliant work, my future financial security, everything I had built was about to be stolen by the man I had trusted most. The first crack in Derek's facade appeared 2 weeks before the investor call, though I didn't recognize it at the time. My friend Marcus, who works at the United States Patent and Trademark Office in Alexandria, Virginia, called with what he thought was routine congratulations. "Hey, Rosalind saw the amended filings for your encryption patent. Interesting how they restructured the inventor attribution. Derek must be getting more involved in the technical side now." His casual comment felt like ice water in my veins. I had never authorized any amendments to my patent application. That evening, I drove to Marcus's office building near the Potomac River, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the patent research room, Marcus showed me documents that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Derek. Filing after filing, all submitted over the past 2 months, systematically removing my name as primary inventor and replacing it with Derek's credentials. The paperwork was sophisticated, professional, complete with forged signatures and fabricated development timelines that credited Derek with the foundational concepts of my algorithm. Someone had invested significant time and resources into creating a false narrative of my patent's origin, and that someone had access to my most confidential work files. I stayed up all night reading through the fraudulent documents, my laptop screen glowing in my darkened apartment as I cross-referenced the false claims with my actual development timeline. The documentation painted me as a junior engineer who had simply implemented Derek's visionary concepts, reducing 3 years of innovative work to basic coding tasks. When I confronted the situation the next morning, I started noticing details that had previously seemed insignificant. Derek's insistence that all communications about my patent go through his email account suddenly felt controlling rather than protective. His requests for copies of my personal development notes, which I had interpreted as diligent record-keeping, now appeared to be evidence gathering for his theft. I began finding emails accidentally copied to my address that revealed Derek's private discussions about minimizing my role in the patent development. Messages to the company's legal team described strategies for clarifying the collaborative nature of the encryption project and properly attributing management oversight to technical innovation. The language was carefully crafted to make Derek's theft sound like legitimate corporate governance. My personal life became strained as the reality of Derek's betrayal sank in. Tyler, my boyfriend of 2 years and a corporate attorney specializing in intellectual property law, had warned me months earlier about the importance of independent legal protection. We had argued about it over dinner at Uchi, with Tyler urging me to secure my own counsel and me defending Derek's commitment to my interests. Corporate loyalty only goes one direction. Tyler had said, his frustration evident as he set down his chopsticks. You need documentation that can't be controlled or manipulated by your employer. I had dismissed his concerns as paranoia, trusting Derek's repeated assurances about my protected status as the patent's inventor. My sister Emma, a business professor at the University of Texas, had also expressed concerns about Derek's reputation in Austin's startup community. During our monthly coffee at Radio Coffee on Barton Springs Road, she had mentioned rumors about Derek's aggressive approach to intellectual property acquisition and his history of conflicts with former employees. I'm not saying he's definitely unethical, Emma had cautioned, stirring her latte thoughtfully, but successful entrepreneurs don't always achieve that success through generous collaboration with their teams. I had defended Derek passionately, citing his mentorship and his promises about my future role in the company. Now, reading through his private emails about strategies to transition technical responsibilities away from individual contributors toward management oversight, I realized Emma's warnings had been entirely accurate. Derek had never intended to honor his promises about my advancement or my intellectual property rights. Sarah from HR approached me privately that Tuesday afternoon, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety. She asked me to meet her at Mozart's Coffee Roasters, far from the office, claiming she needed to discuss confidential personnel matters. Sitting on the deck, overlooking Lake Austin, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of water and conversation, Sarah delivered devastating news about Derek's systematic plan to destroy my career. "He's been building a case to terminate your employment," Sarah whispered, glancing around nervously to ensure we weren't overheard. "Performance issues, attitude problems, failure to collaborate effectively with management. The documentation goes back 6 months, and it's detailed enough to justify immediate termination for cause." She showed me printed copies of fake performance reviews, fabricated incident reports, and manufactured complaints from colleagues who had supposedly raised concerns about my professional behavior. The paperwork was extensive, convincing, and completely fraudulent. Derek had been preparing to fire me long before I discovered his patent theft. Patricia, Derek's assistant for over 5 years, had been acting strangely distant for weeks, avoiding eye contact and responding to my questions with uncharacteristic brevity. Now I understood her discomfort. She had been watching Derek orchestrate my professional destruction while maintaining the facade of mentorship and support. The most chilling discovery came when I accessed my company email late that Thursday night and found a message Derek had intended to send to James, the CFO, but had accidentally included me in the recipient list. The subject line read, "Rosalind Transition Timeline," and the content discussed strategies for completing the IP transfer before implementing personnel changes. Derek had already filed preliminary paperwork for the company's initial public offering, listing my patent as core intellectual property with himself as the inventor. The estimated company valuation, based entirely on my stolen innovation, $1.2 billion. The timeline showed my termination scheduled for the day after the investor call, ensuring that I would be removed immediately after Derek had used my work to secure funding. I finally understood that the upcoming investor call wasn't a routine quarterly review. It was Derek's theatrical performance designed to humiliate me publicly and establish grounds for my termination, while simultaneously using my patent to secure hundreds of millions in investment funding. He had planned every detail of my professional execution while pretending to be my greatest advocate. The following Monday brought revelations that made Derek's betrayal even more sinister than I had imagined. While reviewing quarterly financial reports that James had accidentally sent to the entire senior staff, I noticed meeting expenses for locations I didn't recognize, and attendee lists that included representatives from Data Vault Industries, one of TechFlow's biggest competitors. When I mentioned this to James during our chance encounter at the coffee station, his reaction was immediate and telling. His face flushed red, and he quickly tried to dismiss the meetings as preliminary discussions about industry collaboration. But his nervous fidgeting with his coffee cup and his inability to maintain eye contact told a different story. That afternoon, I decided to conduct my own investigation. Tyler had taught me basic corporate research techniques during our early dating conversations about his legal work, and I spent the evening using public business databases to trace Derek's recent activities. What I discovered was a sophisticated scheme that went far beyond simple patent theft. Derek had established three shell companies over the past year, each registered in different states with minimal public disclosure requirements. The companies had no employees, no business operations, and no apparent purpose except to serve as vehicles for hiding financial transactions. Through careful analysis of corporate filings and cross-referencing with TechFlow's expense reports, I traced a pattern of Derek meeting with potential patent buyers while using company resources to fund his personal enrichment scheme. The most damaging evidence came from a series of non-disclosure agreements I found buried in Derek's public business filings. Data Vault Industries had signed confidentiality contracts specifically related to advanced encryption technology developed by TechFlow Solutions. The dates on the agreements corresponded exactly with periods when Derek had restricted my access to development meetings and insisted that all technical discussions go through his approval. Derek wasn't just planning to steal my patent and use it for TechFlow's public offering. He was simultaneously negotiating to sell the licensing rights to competitors, potentially earning millions in additional revenue that would flow directly to his shell companies rather than to TechFlow's shareholders or employees. Tyler's legal expertise became invaluable as I shared my discoveries with him over dinner at Lenoir, a quiet restaurant where we could discuss the situation without fear of being overheard by TechFlow colleagues. His analysis of Derek's activities was both professionally thorough and personally supportive. "This isn't just intellectual property theft," Tyler explained, reviewing printouts of Derek's corporate filings spread across our table. "This is securities fraud conspiracy to defraud investors, and potentially racketeering if we can prove a pattern of similar behavior at his previous companies." His legal training helped me understand the full scope of Derek's criminality and the strength of my potential case against him. Emma joined our investigation by researching Derek's professional history, using her academic access to business databases and her network of contacts throughout Austin's entrepreneurial community. Her findings painted a disturbing pattern of Derek's career advancement through intellectual property theft and employee exploitation. "He's done this before," Emma reported during our emergency family meeting at my apartment. "At least twice in the past decade, Derek has joined promising companies, identified their most innovative employees, gained access to their breakthrough work, and then forced them out while claiming credit for their discoveries." She had documentation of legal settlements, former employees who had been silenced by non-disclosure agreements, and industry rumors about Derek's unethical practices. Emma helped me contact Dr. Angela Morrison, a former colleague of Derek's, who had experienced similar treatment at his previous company 5 years earlier. Dr. Morrison, now working as an independent consultant in Silicon Valley, agreed to meet with us via video conference, and her testimony provided crucial insights into Derek's systematic approach to innovation theft. "Derek identifies brilliant people who trust easily," Dr. Morrison explained from her home office in Palo Alto, her voice heavy with the weight of shared experience. "He builds relationships with them, gains access to their work documents, everything they create, and then systematically destroys their credibility while claiming their innovations as his own management vision." She shared legal documents from her own case against Derek, including email evidence of his acknowledgement of her intellectual property ownership, followed by his fraudulent attempts to claim credit for her work. Her settlement agreement included non-disclosure provisions that had prevented her from warning Derek's future victims, but the statute of limitations on those restrictions had recently expired. The workplace hostility escalated dramatically as Derek became aware that I was asking questions about his business activities. He began openly questioning my competence during team meetings, interrupting my presentations to claim that I was taking credit for collaborative achievements that belonged to the entire development team. "Rosalind seems to have forgotten that innovation is a team effort," Derek announced during our Wednesday morning staff meeting, his voice dripping with condescension as he addressed the room of 12 engineers and managers. Individual contributors shouldn't overestimate their importance to company success. The personal attack felt like a physical blow delivered in front of colleagues who had witnessed my years of dedicated work. James started treating me like I had already been terminated, excluding me from financial planning meetings and redirecting questions about my projects to Derek's direct oversight. When I asked about my upcoming performance review, James claimed that Derek was handling all personnel evaluations personally and that my status would be determined based on management assessment of overall value contribution. The documentation of fake performance issues accelerated rapidly. Derek began copying senior staff on emails criticizing my attitude problems and resistance to collaborative feedback. He scheduled meetings specifically to address my unprofessional behavior and created written records of conversations that had never actually occurred. Patricia, meanwhile, began demonstrating subtle acts of support that risked her own employment security. She would accidentally leave important documents on the printer near my desk, include me in calendar invitations for meetings Derek hadn't intended me to attend, and forward crucial emails to my personal account with subject lines that appeared to be forwarding errors. Through Patricia's covert assistance, I learned that Derek had scheduled my termination for the Friday following the Thursday investor call. The timing was strategic. Derek would use my patent to secure hundreds of millions in funding on Thursday, then eliminate me on Friday with documentation, claiming I had been fired for cause, which would legally complicate any attempt I might make to challenge his theft of my intellectual property. The investor call wasn't just a routine quarterly review. It was Derek's final performance as my mentor and supporter, designed to publicly establish his authority over my work, while simultaneously creating grounds for my termination. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated to maximize his financial gain, while minimizing my ability to seek justice. But Derek had made one crucial mistake in his elaborate scheme. His confidence in his own superiority had prevented him from considering that I might be capable of building my own plan for justice. While he was preparing for my professional execution, I was preparing for war. Thursday morning arrived with the oppressive humidity that makes Austin summers legendary. I dressed carefully in my navy blue blazer and white blouse, the same professional outfit I had worn for my interview 3 years earlier. Derek had scheduled the quarterly investor call for 10:30, perfectly timed to showcase TechFlow's achievements to Meridian Capital Fund and three other major investment groups. The conference room on the 14th floor had been prepared like a stage set for Derek's performance. 12 TechFlow executives arranged themselves around the polished mahogany table, while 4 external investors joined virtually through the wall-mounted screens that dominated the far end of the room. The setup was designed to make Derek appear commanding and authoritative, surrounded by his successful team, and addressing the financial leaders who would determine TechFlow's future valuation. Derek opened the meeting with his characteristic charm, welcoming everyone and outlining TechFlow's remarkable growth over the past year. His presentation included detailed financial projections, market expansion plans, and strategic partnerships that positioned the company as a leader in data security innovation. Everything was professionally crafted to impress potential investors and justify the company's ambitious valuation expectations. When Derek reached the technical portion of his presentation, he highlighted TechFlow's revolutionary encryption patent as the company's crown jewel. He described the algorithm's capabilities with enthusiasm and expertise, explaining how the innovation would transform data security across multiple industries. His presentation made it clear that this single patent justified the majority of TechFlow's billion-dollar valuation. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, maintaining my composure as Derek presented my life's work as his own visionary achievement. The investors asked detailed questions about the patent's development timeline, its competitive advantages, and its potential licensing revenue. Derek answered confidently, occasionally crediting our talented development team while carefully avoiding any specific mention of my individual contributions. When one of the Meridian representatives asked about the patent's technical architecture, Derek gestured toward me with apparent generosity. Rosalind has been instrumental in the implementation of our encryption concepts, he said, his tone suggesting that he was graciously sharing credit for work that belonged primarily to him. Perhaps she can explain some of the technical details. As I began to describe the algorithm's innovative approach to data packet sequencing, Derek interrupted with a condescending smile. Let me clarify the strategic framework that guided our development process, he said, effectively silencing me while repositioning my explanation as implementation of his strategic vision. The humiliation was swift and thorough, conducted with the appearance of professional collaboration while actually establishing his dominance over my expertise. The room of executives and investors witnessed this exchange with varying degrees of comfort. Some appeared slightly uncomfortable with Derek's dismissive treatment of my input, while others seemed to accept his framing of our respective roles without question. The power dynamic was clear. Derek was the visionary leader, and I was merely a skilled technician who executed his innovative concepts. But the devastating blow came 30 minutes later as Derek concluded his presentation and moved into discussion of personnel and compensation structures. With 12 company executives and 4 major investors listening intently, Derek delivered his prepared announcement about my career prospects. Speaking of our development team, Derek said, his voice carrying a tone of regretful authority, I need to address some recent performance issues that have affected our project efficiency. He paused dramatically, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the room before continuing with his attack. Rosalind has requested a significant salary increase and enhanced bonus compensation. Derek announced his presentation, remote-clicking to a slide that outlined my salary, history, and current compensation package. However, based on recent performance evaluations and feedback from team members, we've determined that a raise isn't appropriate at this time. The silence in the room was deafening as Derek continued his public humiliation. In fact, due to ongoing attitude issues and resistance to collaborative feedback, we've decided to cancel her annual bonus entirely. We believe this will encourage better alignment with team goals and company culture. Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, while others maintained professional poker faces that revealed nothing about their thoughts regarding Derek's public criticism of my performance. The investors appeared to view the discussion as routine personnel management, though one of the Meridian representatives took notes about what he presumably considered a potential risk factor in TechFlow's organizational stability. The room erupted in nervous laughter as Derek delivered his final blow. Sometimes brilliant individual contributors need clear feedback about the importance of collaboration and professional attitude, he said, his smile appearing warm and paternal, while his words delivered maximum damage to my professional reputation. I maintained perfect composure throughout the humiliation, nodding politely and avoiding any reaction that could be interpreted as unprofessional or emotional. Inside, my heart was pounding with a mixture of fury and determination, but I knew that any visible response would only reinforce Derek's narrative about my attitude problems and inability to accept feedback gracefully. What Derek didn't realize was that his public performance was actually serving my interests as much as his own. While he was establishing his authority and justifying my upcoming termination, he was also creating detailed evidence of his systematic campaign against me. Patricia was discreetly recording the meeting from her position near the door, violating company policy but preserving crucial documentation of Derek's behavior. Meanwhile, my phone vibrated with a text message that nearly caused me to break my professional composure. Tyler had sent a simple update: cease and desist filed, SEC complaint submitted, patent investigation initiated. He has no idea what's coming. While Derek was conducting his theatrical destruction of my career in front of major investors, my legal team was simultaneously launching a comprehensive attack on his fraudulent scheme. The timing was perfect. Derek's public claims about owning my patent were being made at the exact moment when federal investigators were beginning their examination of his false patent filings. Marcus from the patent office had been coordinating with my attorneys throughout the week, ensuring that Derek's fraudulent amendments were flagged for immediate investigation. Sarah from HR was providing testimony about Derek's systematic harassment and his fabrication of performance issues. Dr. Angela Morrison was sharing evidence of Derek's previous intellectual property thefts that established a clear pattern of criminal behavior. As Derek concluded his presentation and thanked the investors for their time, he had no idea that his entire empire was about to collapse. The investment funds he was trying to secure would soon discover that their potential golden goose actually belonged to the woman he had just humiliated in front of them. The patent that justified TechFlow's billion-dollar valuation was owned by the employee he was planning to fire the following day. I excused myself from the meeting with quiet professionalism, thanking Derek for the opportunity to participate in the investor presentation and expressing my commitment to continued excellence in my work. My performance was flawless, giving Derek no ammunition for additional criticism while maintaining my dignity in front of witnesses who would soon understand the true dynamics of our relationship. Walking back to my desk, I felt a sense of calm determination that surprised me. The humiliation had been painful, but it was also the final piece of evidence I needed to prove Derek's systematic campaign against me. His arrogance had led him to conduct his destruction of my career in front of witnesses, creating a permanent record of his behavior that would soon be used against him in federal court. The trap was set, and Derek had walked directly into it with complete confidence in his own superiority. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes Austin feel alive with possibility. While Derek was probably celebrating his successful investor presentation over breakfast at some expensive downtown restaurant, I was sitting in the offices of Morrison Chen and Associates, signing documents that would destroy his world. My attorney, Rebecca Chen, had assembled a legal strategy that was as comprehensive as it was devastating. The intellectual property theft lawsuit included 43 pages of evidence, ranging from my original development documentation to Derek's fraudulent patent filings to email records proving his systematic deception. The securities fraud complaint to the SEC detailed Derek's scheme to defraud investors by claiming ownership of intellectual property he had stolen from an employee he was simultaneously planning to terminate. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of intellectual property theft I've encountered in 20 years of practice, Rebecca explained as she reviewed the final documents before filing. Derek's arrogance worked in our favor. He documented his own crimes through email, left paper trails of his fraudulent activities, and created witnesses through his public humiliation of you during the investor call. The legal strategy included multiple fronts designed to ensure Derek couldn't escape justice through technicalities or procedural delays. The federal lawsuit would address the intellectual property theft and securities fraud. The patent office investigation would restore my legitimate ownership of the algorithm. The SEC complaint would trigger a comprehensive audit of TechFlow's pre-IPO documentation and Derek's personal financial activities. But the most satisfying element of our attack was the whistleblower complaint that would expose Derek's systematic pattern of innovation theft across multiple companies. Dr. Angela Morrison had agreed to serve as a witness, sharing evidence of Derek's previous crimes that had been hidden by non-disclosure agreements. 2 other former Derek victims had also come forward, creating an undeniable pattern of criminal behavior. The documents were filed simultaneously at 9:15 Friday morning, just as Derek was probably reviewing his termination paperwork for our scheduled 10:30 meeting. By 9:45, Derek's phone was ringing with calls from process servers, federal investigators, and panicked board members who had received copies of the legal complaints. I spent Friday morning at my desk working on routine development tasks and maintaining perfect professional normalcy while Derek's world collapsed around him. Patricia kept me informed through subtle updates about the chaos erupting in the executive suite. Derek had called 3 emergency meetings, canceled his planned announcement of my termination, and spent most of the morning screaming at his attorney over the phone. He keeps asking how this happened, Patricia whispered during her casual stop by my desk to drop off supply requisitions. He's demanding to know how you could have gotten legal counsel without him finding out. He seems genuinely shocked that you were capable of fighting back. Sarah from HR confirmed that Derek's reaction was equal parts fury and panic. He had demanded that she immediately terminate my employment, claiming that my legal action constituted insubordination and violation of company loyalty policies. When Sarah explained that firing an employee who had filed federal complaints could constitute illegal retaliation, Derek became even more agitated. He threatened to fire me for refusing to terminate you illegally, Sarah reported during our lunch meeting at Central Market, far from the office and away from potential eavesdropping. I told him that I wouldn't violate federal employment law just because he was angry about being caught stealing intellectual property. He actually asked me whether I understood who pays my salary. The most gratifying moment came when James, the CFO, requested an emergency meeting with me Friday afternoon. His demeanor had transformed from dismissive superiority to desperate concern as he realized the potential impact of my legal action on TechFlow's financial future. The board wants to understand the full scope of this patent dispute. James explained, his voice carefully neutral as he tried to assess the damage to Derek's credibility and the company's prospects. The Meridian Fund has suspended their investment pending resolution of the intellectual property questions. The other investors are conducting their own investigations. I maintained complete professionalism during our conversation, explaining that my legal action was focused specifically on Derek's theft of my intellectual property and his fraudulent misrepresentation of ownership to potential investors. I emphasized that I remained committed to TechFlow's success and hoped the company would distance itself from Derek's criminal behavior rather than supporting his fraudulent claims. Obviously, this situation is complex, James said carefully, recognizing that his previous dismissive treatment of me had been based on incomplete information provided by Derek. The board will need to conduct a thorough investigation to understand exactly what happened and how to protect the company's interests going forward. The Austin tech community's reaction was swift and brutal for Derek's reputation. Word spread quickly through the informal networks that connect startup founders, investors, and legal professionals throughout the city. By Friday afternoon, Derek was receiving calls from journalists interested in covering the story of intellectual property theft and securities fraud at one of Austin's fastest-growing companies. Emma helped coordinate media strategy, ensuring that my side of the story reached influential business publications before Derek could craft his own narrative. Her academic connections and her understanding of business journalism helped position my case as a cautionary tale about protecting individual innovators from corporate exploitation. Derek's finished in Austin, Emma reported, after speaking with contacts at the Austin Business Journal and TechCrunch. Nobody wants to be associated with intellectual property theft, especially when it involves defrauding major investment funds. His reputation for building successful companies has been permanently destroyed. Tyler's legal expertise proved invaluable for understanding the broader implications of our legal strategy. His network of intellectual property attorneys provided insights into federal enforcement priorities and potential outcomes for Derek's criminal exposure. His personal support helped me maintain emotional equilibrium during the stress of challenging someone who had controlled my professional life for 3 years. Derek's facing potential federal prison time, Tyler explained over dinner Friday evening, reviewing updates from Rebecca about the government's response to our complaints. Intellectual property theft, securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud investors are serious federal crimes. Even if he avoids prison, his career is over and his personal assets will be frozen pending resolution of the civil litigation. But the most shocking development came Saturday morning when Patricia called my personal cell phone with information that demonstrated just how desperate Derek had become. She had discovered that Derek was frantically trying to complete his planned sale of my patent to Data Vault Industries, apparently believing he could finalize the transaction before the legal system could stop him. He's been calling Data Vault's executives all morning, Patricia reported, her voice shaking with anxiety about violating her employment obligations while still trying to do the right thing. He's offering them an immediate license for half the original asking price if they can complete the transaction by Monday morning. He thinks he can sell your patent before the courts issue restraining orders. Derek's desperation was actually working against him by providing additional evidence of his criminal intent and his awareness that his scheme was illegal. His attempts to accelerate the patent sale demonstrated that he understood he was stealing someone else's intellectual property and was trying to complete the theft before being stopped by legal authorities. But Data Vault's legal team had already been contacted by my attorneys and informed about the intellectual property dispute. Rather than proceeding with Derek's illegal transaction, Data Vault's executives were now interested in discussing legitimate licensing arrangements with the actual patent owner, me. The revolution was complete. In less than 48 hours, Derek had been transformed from a successful CEO positioning his company for a billion-dollar IPO into a desperate criminal facing federal prosecution and financial ruin. Meanwhile, I had evolved from a humiliated employee facing termination into the owner of intellectual property that major corporations were eager to license legitimately. Derek's phone had quite literally dropped from his hands as he realized that his elaborate scheme had not only failed catastrophically, but had also elevated his intended victim into the exact position of power and recognition he had tried to steal for himself. Monday morning brought news that Derek's situation had deteriorated even further over the weekend. Rebecca called me at 7:30 with updates that exceeded even our most optimistic expectations for the legal case. The federal court issued a temporary restraining order preventing Derek from selling, licensing, or transferring the patent, she reported with barely contained satisfaction. More importantly, the SEC investigation has expanded to include Derek's previous companies and his financial activities over the past 5 years. They've frozen his personal assets, pending completion of their fraud investigation. The restraining order was particularly devastating because it confirmed my legitimate ownership of the patent, while simultaneously preventing Derek from completing any of the licensing deals he had negotiated based on his false claims. Data Vault Industries had voluntarily suspended their discussions with Derek and issued a public statement distancing themselves from any individual or company involved in intellectual property disputes. Derek's attempts to maintain control of TechFlow became increasingly desperate and erratic. He had spent the weekend calling board members demanding their support and threatening to resign if the company didn't defend him against my malicious legal attack. According to Sarah, who had received calls from several board members seeking information about Derek's behavior, his weekend performance had been paranoid and unhinged. When Derek arrived at the office Monday morning, he immediately called an emergency all-hands meeting in the main conference room. His appearance shocked everyone who had known him as a polished, confident executive. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled, his hair was disheveled, and his demeanor alternated between aggressive defensiveness and desperate pleading. Some of you may have heard rumors about legal issues affecting the company, Derek announced to the 40 employees gathered in the conference room. I want to address these rumors directly and explain how a disgruntled employee is trying to damage TechFlow through false accusations and legal harassment. His presentation was rambling, contradictory, and obviously desperate. He claimed that I was trying to steal credit for collaborative work, while simultaneously acknowledging that the patent was primarily based on concepts I developed before Rosalind joined the team. He insisted that my legal action was motivated by anger about performance feedback, while also claiming that I was an essential contributor whose departure would damage the company. The engineering team's reaction was immediate and unequivocal. Amanda, our senior developer who had worked closely with me for 2 years, stood up during Derek's presentation and addressed him directly. We all know Rosalind developed that algorithm. Amanda declared her voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the development process firsthand. We watched her work on it for months. We reviewed her code, we tested her implementations. Your claims about developing the foundational concepts are completely false, and everyone in this room knows it. Her statement triggered a cascade of support from other team members who had observed my work and Derek's systematic attempts to claim credit for my innovations. Within minutes, Derek faced open rebellion from the technical staff who understood the reality of intellectual property development and recognized his fraudulent claims. If Derek remains as CEO, I'm resigning immediately, Amanda continued her declaration, supported by nodding heads throughout the room. I won't work for someone who steals credit from team members and lies about technical contributions. Her stance was echoed by 7 other engineers who indicated their willingness to leave rather than continue working under Derek's leadership. James, the CFO, had been conducting his own investigation over the weekend and arrived Monday morning with devastating news about Derek's financial activities. During an emergency board meeting Monday afternoon, James presented evidence of Derek's unauthorized fund transfers, his establishment of shell companies, and his negotiations to sell company intellectual property for personal profit. Derek has been systematically looting TechFlow's assets while preparing to abandon the company, James reported to the board, according to Sarah, who had been asked to take minutes for the meeting. The shell companies, the secret licensing deals, the patent theft, everything was designed to enrich Derek personally, while leaving TechFlow with worthless intellectual property claims and potential criminal liability. The board's response was swift and decisive. By Tuesday morning, Derek had been terminated as CEO, stripped of his equity ownership, and banned from TechFlow property. The company issued a public statement acknowledging that Derek had made false claims about intellectual property ownership and expressing their commitment to supporting legitimate innovation while cooperating with federal investigators. But Derek's nightmare was just beginning. Wednesday brought news that federal prosecutors were considering criminal charges related to his intellectual property theft and securities fraud. The FBI had executed search warrants at Derek's home and office, seizing computers, documents, and financial records that would provide evidence for potential criminal prosecution. Derek's facing up to 20 years in federal prison if they proceed with all possible charges, Tyler explained as we reviewed the latest developments over dinner at Odd Duck. Intellectual property theft, securities fraud conspiracy to defraud investors, and racketeering based on his pattern of similar crimes at previous companies. The federal government takes this kind of white-collar crime very seriously. The investigation had also uncovered evidence of Derek's previous victims, creating a comprehensive case that demonstrated his systematic approach to innovation theft throughout his career. Dr. Angela Morrison's testimony had opened floodgates of additional complaints from former employees who had been silenced by non-disclosure agreements and intimidated by Derek's legal resources. Patricia, meanwhile, had been cooperating fully with federal investigators, providing them with emails, documents, and recorded conversations that demonstrated Derek's criminal intent and his systematic planning of my professional destruction. Her evidence included Derek's discussions about timing my termination to prevent legal challenges to his patent theft. The most satisfying development came Thursday afternoon when Meridian Capital Fund contacted Rebecca to schedule a meeting with me about potential investment in TechFlow under new leadership. The investment fund that Derek had tried to defraud with false intellectual property claims was now interested in supporting the company based on legitimate ownership of my patent. They want to meet with you as the actual patent owner and potential chief technology officer, Rebecca explained during our preparation for the investor meeting. Derek's fraud actually worked in your favor by introducing your innovation to major investment funds. Now they want to work with the real inventor rather than the person who tried to steal credit for your work. Derek's response to his complete professional destruction was equally devastating and pathetic. According to industry contacts Emma maintained throughout Austin's business community, Derek was desperately trying to find legal representation for his federal criminal case, while simultaneously attempting to preserve some portion of his frozen assets. He's calling everyone he knows, trying to find someone willing to testify that he contributed to your patent development, Emma reported after speaking with mutual contacts in the tech community. Nobody wants to be associated with him, and everyone who actually worked with both of you knows he's lying about his technical contributions. The final blow to Derek's remaining credibility came Friday morning when Data Vault Industries issued a public statement announcing their interest in legitimate licensing discussions with me as the actual patent owner. The company that Derek had tried to defraud was now eager to work directly with me, offering licensing terms that would generate millions in revenue while respecting legitimate intellectual property rights. Derek's empire hadn't just collapsed, it had been systematically demolished by the legal system, abandoned by his business associates, and replaced by legitimate opportunities that recognized my actual contributions rather than his fraudulent claims. The man who had tried to steal my life's work was facing federal prison time while I was being courted by the same investors and business partners he had attempted to deceive. His phone hadn't just dropped from his hands during that devastating call from Meridian's lawyer. It had symbolically marked the moment when Derek realized that his elaborate scheme to destroy me had instead destroyed himself, while elevating me to exactly the position of success and recognition I had been always deserved. 6 months later, I stood in the same 14th floor conference room where Derek had humiliated me, but now I was addressing the board of directors as TechFlow's newly appointed chief technology officer. The mahogany table reflected the morning sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked Lady Bird Lake, and the faces around the table showed the respect and attention that my expertise and leadership had earned. Derek's legal troubles had concluded with a federal plea agreement that sentenced him to 8 years in prison for intellectual property, theft, securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud investors. His assets remained frozen under court order, with restitution payments directed to his victims and the government. The man who had tried to steal my future was spending his present in federal custody, contemplating the consequences of his crimes. The Patent Office had officially restored me as the sole inventor of encryption, patent number 4532, invalidating all of Derek's fraudulent documentation and confirming my legitimate ownership of the intellectual property that had become the foundation of TechFlow's success. The legal process had been thorough, detailed, and conclusive, establishing precedents that would protect other innovators from similar theft. Dr. Angela Morrison had become more than a witness in my legal case. She had evolved into a mentor and friend who helped me understand the broader implications of challenging powerful executives who abuse their positions. Her courage in testifying against Derek had inspired other victims to come forward, creating a comprehensive case that demonstrated his systematic criminality across multiple companies. Derek's conviction sends a message throughout the industry, Dr. Morrison said during her recent visit to Austin for a technology conference. Intellectual property theft isn't an acceptable business strategy, and employees who create genuine innovations have legal rights that can't be stolen through corporate manipulation and intimidation. Sarah had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, bringing her ethical leadership and employee advocacy skills to the executive level where they could benefit the entire organization. Her decision to preserve evidence of Derek's harassment and to refuse his illegal orders had demonstrated the kind of moral courage that TechFlow needed in its leadership structure. Patricia had been recognized as Employee of the Year for her crucial role in exposing Derek's crimes and protecting company interests despite personal risk to her employment security. Her careful documentation of Derek's activities had provided federal investigators with evidence that made prosecution possible and conviction inevitable. James remained as CFO, but his perspective had been fundamentally changed by witnessing Derek's systematic fraud and its potential impact on company finances. He had implemented new oversight procedures designed to prevent future executive misconduct and protect intellectual property rights of all employees. Meridian Capital Fund had completed their investment in TechFlow at a higher valuation than originally projected, specifically citing confidence in my leadership and the potential of my encryption technology. The $440 million investment provided resources for expanding research and development while ensuring that innovation would be properly attributed and compensated. My personal relationships had been strengthened through the challenges of confronting Derek's betrayal and building a case for justice. Tyler and I had grown closer as his legal expertise proved invaluable for navigating complex federal investigations and corporate restructuring. Our shared commitment to protecting intellectual property rights had become the foundation for launching our own legal consulting firm, specializing in innovation protection for individual inventors. Emma's academic research had been enriched by real-world experience with corporate fraud and intellectual property theft. She was developing educational curricula designed to help young entrepreneurs understand legal protections available for their innovations and strategies for avoiding exploitation by unethical employers or business partners. Marcus from the Patent Office had become an ongoing advisor as I continued developing new encryption technologies, ensuring that my future innovations would be properly protected from the moment of conception through full legal implementation. His expertise in federal patent procedures had been crucial for establishing the legal frameworks that would prevent future theft attempts. The encryption patent itself had generated licensing revenue that exceeded everyone's initial projections. Data Vault Industries had become a major licensing partner, paying substantial fees for legitimate access to technology they had previously discussed acquiring through Derek's fraudulent schemes. Other companies throughout the data security industry had negotiated similar licensing agreements, creating ongoing revenue streams that funded continued research and development. TechFlow's initial public offering had been postponed during the legal proceedings, but the company was now preparing for public markets with transparent intellectual property documentation and ethical leadership that inspired confidence among potential investors. The IPO prospectus clearly identified me as the inventor of the core encryption technology and detailed my ongoing role in the company's technical development. My speaking engagements at technology conferences had evolved into a platform for educating other innovators about protecting their intellectual property rights and recognizing warning signs of potential theft. The story of Derek's attempted fraud and ultimate prosecution had become a cautionary tale that resonated throughout the industry, inspiring stronger legal protections and more ethical business practices. The most meaningful outcome was the transformation of my own understanding about personal worth, professional value, and the importance of standing up for justice, even when confronting powerful adversaries. Derek's betrayal had initially felt like devastating personal and professional destruction, but the process of fighting back had revealed strengths and capabilities I hadn't known I possessed. The patent that Derek had tried to steal was now generating millions in legitimate revenue funding research that would benefit society while providing financial security for my family and team. The intellectual property I had developed during late nights in my small apartment had become the foundation for a career that combined technical innovation with advocacy for ethical business practices. Looking back on that devastating investor call where Derek had publicly humiliated me while planning my termination, I realized that his arrogance had actually created the evidence necessary for his own destruction. His confidence in his superiority had prevented him from considering that I might be capable of effective resistance, leading him to document his crimes through email and conduct his harassment in front of witnesses. The lesson that emerged from this experience was both personal and professional brilliance and hard work aren't sufficient for success if they aren't combined with awareness of potential threats and willingness to fight for justice. Derek's ability to steal credit for other people's innovations had depended on his victims' trust, naivety, and reluctance to challenge authority figures. My willingness to fight back had not only protected my own interests, but had also prevented him from victimizing future innovators. Most importantly, the experience had taught me that individual technical excellence must be combined with strong personal relationships, legal protections, and ethical business practices. The support I received from Tyler, Emma, Marcus, Sarah, Patricia, and Dr. Morrison had been crucial for building an effective response to Derek's systematic fraud. Innovation thrives in environments where creativity is protected, recognized, and rewarded fairly. Standing in that conference room as Chief Technology Officer of a company valued at over $1 billion, holding patents worth millions in licensing revenue, surrounded by colleagues who respected my contributions and supported my leadership, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment of professional success and personal fulfillment. Derek had tried to steal my future, but his betrayal had instead taught me to build a better one than I had ever imagined possible. Justice had been served, relationships had been strengthened, and innovation had been protected through legal systems designed to reward genuine creativity while punishing fraudulent theft. The phone call that had caused Derek to drop his device in shock had marked the beginning of his downfall and the foundation of my rise. Sometimes the greatest victories emerge from the most devastating betrayals, especially when courage and determination transform apparent defeat into ultimate triumph. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted in your professional life? How did you handle the situation, and what would you do differently if you could go back and change your response? Share your story in the comments below and let me know whether you think fighting back against workplace injustice is always worth the personal cost and professional risk. If this story resonated with your own experiences or inspired you to think differently about protecting your professional interests, please hit the like button to help other people find this content. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about overcoming workplace challenges and standing up for justice in corporate environments. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding how legal protections can help individual innovators fight back against powerful executives who try to steal credit for other people's work. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it encourages you to value your own contributions, protect your intellectual property, and never allow anyone to diminish your worth or steal your achievements. Remember that brilliance combined with courage can overcome even the most sophisticated schemes designed to exploit your trust and steal your future. Stay strong, stay smart, and never stop fighting for the recognition and compensation you deserve.